What if BAXCALIBUR was in Gen 1 Ubers? I once covered this thing in Gen 1 OU, and this was originally going to be a revisited video. But you know what? I have seen BAXCALIBUR used in action so much, and I have seen it used in Gen 1 OU before. And I am completely and utterly convinced that this thing is way too strong for vanilla RBY. If this thing was in the tier, it would be banned. And you know what? After I make the replays, I realize, oh, this thing's pretty good. Let's put it up against Mew and Mewtwo. And how good did it do against Mew and Mewtwo? Well, you see the title of the video. This is Gen 1 Ubers. This thing is good. Really, really good. It's honestly spectacular. And there's so many reasons for that. Now, to start off with, Dragon Ice is a great typing. I would say the only typing in terms of pairing with Dragon that would be better in Gen 1 would be Dragon and Steel. And for that, I think it's pretty obvious why that's pretty good. And stick around for tomorrow, where I might cover another Dragon and Steel Pokemon. But for now, let's just talk about the benefits that Dragon and Ice has in Gen 1 OU. A resistance to electric, water, grass. That already sounds pretty good. You have a neutrality to fire, but genuinely, who cares? Fire does not resist ice in Generation 1, so the only real thing using Fire Blast, aka Moltres, is weak to your Blizzard. So it's not going to try to fish for burns against you. You do have an ice neutrality, however, it doesn't matter, because not only are you incredibly bulky, but in some ways, you're kind of like so enjoying a resistance. And by that, I mean, you have a full-on immunity to freeze. That is huge, because suddenly, things like Starmie can no longer hope to just get a lucky freeze against you. So, that alone already cuts out so many Pokemon that would be hoping to beat you with a little bit of cheese. Because now, everything in the tier, unless they put you to sleep, spoiler alert, no player will be dumb enough to let their BAXCALIBUR fall asleep. So in almost any circumstance, you can't just cheese this thing out. You have no choice but to beat it with its sheer bulk and power. And now let's get on to why this thing is just absolutely unbeatable. And that's these stats. Like, holy crap, this thing does not have a single bad stat in it. That HP is insane. 115, are you kidding me? This is one of the bulkiest Pokemon in the entire tier. In terms of Gen 1, I think it's, like, really high up there. Like, let's quickly go to RBY, and then let's do this by HP. Yeah, as you can see, like, it has the exact same HP as Jigglypuff, which is weird, but, like, more than Rhydon and Kangaskhan, more than Exeggutor. And then you add that with other broken stats. Because for things like Chansey and Snorlax, yeah, they have a lot of HP, but they make up for it by having low stats somewhere else. Chansey's obvious, and for Snorlax, you have 65 in Special and Defense. That's not the case here. 92 Defense is insane. That is really, really great for Gen 1. And now you have that with super high HP, and then 86 Special Defense, which was already pretty great. Keep in mind that yesterday, I did a video on Let's Go Eevee. That has 85 defense, and even with its really low HP, 85 special defense was enough to where even things like Starmie can only 3-hit KO it with Blizzard. Now let's give this thing high HP and high defense. What is killing BAXCALIBUR? That's right, nothing. And BAXCALIBUR doesn't even want to take advantage of it with sub and rest. And don't get me wrong, this thing could absolutely be busted with substitute. You are not breaking this thing sub with a single Nightshade or Seismic Toss. And you can definitely survive enough turns to where you can wake up and then start attacking again. But you don't need to, because this thing's attacking stats are insane. Dragonite has the highest attack in RBY at 134. This thing has a 145. It is way stronger. Not even a contest. And you have something that Dragonite, or two things that Dragonite really, really wants. And that's Sword Stance and Earthquake. And believe me, we're gonna get there. But even this thing's lowest stat, 75, is your lowest stat. Which, let me stop by saying that's really, really weird, considering this thing is based off Godzilla. If it's based off Godzilla, you would think it would want to prioritize using its special attack, you know? Like Godzilla's Atomic Breath. Tangent over. So 75, and I believe when I originally did this video almost 2 years ago with BAXCALIBUR and Gen 1 OU, I'm pretty sure I was on the conclusion, or at least the misconception that like you would use Blizzard, but that's only because it's stab, and that with 75 is not really that high. That was wrong. And the reason why that was wrong is because, oh boy, I've seen this thing in action, and I've done way more videos now to know that 75 is really good when you have stab. Tauros has 70 special. You have more special than Tauros, and you have stab on your Blizzard. Your Blizzard is hitting pretty dang hard. It is hitting everything in the tier for good damage. And you know what? Because it's Blizzard, you could just fish for a freeze. Because why the heck not? And that's the other thing. Even if you do burn this thing, which first of all, you're getting pretty lucky to burn this thing. Because either you have the balls to keep Moltres out, or you're using a worse Tauros with Fire Blast. Although to be fair, I think that's in theory the best thing you can use against BAXCALIBUR. But even then, this thing is technically a mix attacker, so Blizzard is still fine. So, yeah, it doesn't get much better. And on top of all of that, it has 87 speed. It is faster than Victory Bell. It's faster than Cloyster. And I think Cloyster is a big, big deal. Because Cloyster has super high defense. So in theory, it could be the only thing that can stand out to BAXCALIBUR. But since BAXCALIBUR is faster, it can move first. Cloyster just doesn't have the bulk to stand up to it. And that's because of its moveset. I've gone over plenty of Pokemon that have Sword Stance. And almost every single time, I deemed that the move ultimately wasn't worth it. Either the Pokemon was too frail, and you would just die. Or it just didn't need it in its moveset, or was unnecessary. For example, let's say something like Garchomp, which has it, but it's super fast and you would rather use other moves anyways. That's not really the case for BAXCALIBUR, because one big thing that most Sword Stance users don't have is just the bulk to very freely set up. This thing does not care too much about status, and this thing has the bulk to live anything and then go for a devastating Earthquake. And the funny thing is, this thing also has Body Slam, which in theory could be another thing that you can use just to annoy the opponent. You know, go for Paralysis. But you don't need it. You really don't. Blizzard is all you need to take care of anything that doesn't care about Earthquake. Zapdos gets 2-hit KO'd by Blizzard. Rhydon, it loses 90% to Blizzard. And since you have 87 speed, you have a great crit rate. One of the better crit rates in the entire game. And with 45, or 145 attack, once you get up to, which is one Sword Stance, like max attack will be like 389 or something. But like, with just one Sword Stance, you're in the 700s. And you only need 2 to be a max attack. It is stupid. And you don't need to go for 2. Because Earthquake on its own is probably nuking basically everything. And on top of all of that, Hyper Beam with 145 attack and then a Sword Stance does absolutely stupid amounts of damage. There is basically nothing in this entire game that can live through that much power. Like, I just can't believe I never realized how busted this thing was when I originally did it. But this thing just solos everything. And the worst part is that some things you think would be better sweepers, like something like Tauros, for example. I have seen replays where Tauros goes for crits and still loses, hits twice, sometimes even thrice, still loses, but BAXCALIBUR can even beat that. It's just... It's been a while since I've gone over a Pokemon this broken. And I'm not sure how this would do in other gens. One thing I'm certain about is BAXCALIBUR is more broken here than it is in Gen 9. And just like in Gen 9, I'm convinced it would be banned to Ubers. Now, Gen 2 will be very interesting. In Gen 2, I think probably really good, but I do not know if it's enough to get banned there. But let me know if you'd like to see a video on that. I love to do it. But I think that's about everything. Busted stats, great typing, busted move pool. Now, normally, this is the part where I start showing you the replays, and I'll show you how he goes against Tauros 1v1, then Snorlax, then Chansey. But we're going to do something a little different. Because one thing that BAXCALIBUR has that some of my other videos don't, is that this thing was quite literally just used in one of my Generation Jumble tournaments. For those of you who don't know, I host tournaments based off my what-if scenarios in my Discord server. So I'm just going to show you a quick scene from one of the finals. We had the finals between my council members, Sotina and Zach and Theus. So let's go and I'll just show you an example of what BAXCALIBUR can look like, in practice. So this match is already pretty good. There was already a lot of back and forth with Sotina already losing her Metagross and Alakazam. BAXCALIBUR is just a big monster near, the end game because of its bulk. And something else is the fact that it becomes even harder to beat when you have other sweepers as you see here, Hisuian Zoroark. By the way, as you saw there, it got hit with a critical hit. And even with a critical body slam of Hisuian Zoroark, which has the exact same attack as Tauros, it still survived another body slam afterwards. And this is the example where it didn't even get to do much. But even then, look at that. It killed both Starmie and Zoroark. That's absolutely huge. Leaving a Starmie and a healthy Hisuian Zoroark. You know what, I'll just keep playing this play as I keep talking about what BAXCALIBUR can do for other teams. Because, yeah, the fact that this thing is a great partner towards Pokemon like Tauros and Zoroark is also a big deal. Because if you think about it, any Pokemon that Zoroark or Tauros are scared of, BAXCALIBUR can take care of easily. Tauros does not like to deal with Starmie, nor does it like to deal with Chansey, but BAXCALIBUR has the bulk to deal with both of them easily. So that's the thing that makes it even more unreasonable to deal with. The fact that, you need to deal with other sweepers, and they perfectly complement each other. Although some friendships, I guess, are not meant to last, because now let's see Tauros versus BAXCALIBUR. Although I do want to say, if you would like to join one of my tournaments, or at the very least just talk about, different what-if scenarios or test things, please join the Discord. We would love to have you. Now here's the boy himself, Tauros. That's only not even 25% of BAXCALIBUR, while BAXCALIBUR has an easy 3 KO with Blizzard. But the difference here is that, yeah, the fact that you can just freeze as well, absolutely insane. And if this was an actual 6v6, the moment BAXCALIBUR freezes something, it doesn't even need to go for the kill. That is just a free Hyper Beam, which just makes Blizzard even more busted, because it can potentially support you and help you set up a free Sword Stance. Oh my gosh. And this replay here against Snorlax is going to show just how bulky this thing actually is. So let's count, shall we? That's 1 Body Slam. That's 2 Body Slam, and now you're paralyzed. And that's a Hyper Beam, and BAXCALIBUR is still alive. Do you know anything that isn't Rhydon that can survive 2 Body Slams into a Hyper Beam from Snorlax with Stab? I can't, but BAXCALIBUR has the bulk to do it. It's crazy. Although, looking back at that replay, it might have been better to go for Sword Stance, At the same time, like, fishing for freeze isn't that bad. But speaking of going for sword stance, what the heck is Chansey gonna do to you? And the fun thing about this replay is that this is a replay where BAXCALIBUR gets super unlucky with both missing and with paralysis. But if you saw there, with one sword stance, you did 85% or 75%, like around that range, to Chansey. So in other words, I'm pretty sure Hyper Beam is just a guaranteed OHKO. That is terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And it's not like Chansey can really hurt you either. The only thing that might help it win is with paralysis. But even then, BAXCALIBUR has more than enough opportunities to survive. Here comes Alakazam. It can go for a Psychic, and maybe a crit can be devastating. But paralysis is probably more devastating, let's be real. But yeah, Earthquake, not even Hyper Beam, is more than enough to kill. Although, I would say Zam has a better matchup than Chansey does. Now, Cloyster. It also doesn't help that you resist Clamp. So it's not even like you can Clamp Walk until like they're dead. A Sword Stance, and then Earthquake and the Hyper Beam, it's just KO'd. So even with Cloyster's high defense, with Sword Stance up, it might as well be a 2-hit KO. And yeah, that is not okay. That is really not okay. Next up, we got Executor. Blizzard already hits pretty hard. And you know what? Again, you just have a high speed. So even if 75 was pretty low, and it isn't really for Gen 1, yeah, a critical stab Blizzard, even if it's from a low in Sand Slash with like 35 special attack, that's still gonna hurt. Gengar, yeah. Gengar's not doing much. And this, for to show how bulky BAXCALIBUR is, it can even take both a Psychic and a Explosion from Gengar. It is not even at red. It is not even at red HP. Like, I don't think there's anything else I can really say. But we're going to keep going through these replays. Here we have Jinx. Jinx only gets a 3-hit KO. I guess it's a little bit better than most Pokemon because your crit rate is pretty good. But at the same time, it's not like they're using anti-lead BAXCALIBUR. If BAXCALIBUR is ever meeting Jinx, good chance that both are going to be paralyzed. And even BAXCALIBUR doesn't care about paralysis, because once it goes for Sword Stance, it's just straight up faster than like everything, really, as long as it's paralyzed. Now, I think I already talked about this damage range already. Blizzard's a 90, and Rock Slide technically, like, does half, but it really doesn't matter. You can call this a quick either way, but Rhydon taking any chip throughout the game means that it's just kind of dead. So in this case, even something like Zapdos can like help contribute to the BAXCALIBUR sweep. By the way, as we see Slowbro fail to do anything against this BAXCALIBUR, just know that if you see me in the server, good chance that if I'm seeing BAXCALIBUR used in a replay, once I see it sweep a team, I'll probably start saying in all caps, BAXTAX. If you're watching this video and you're like this far into it, make sure to comment BAXTAX in all caps, just so I know that you're paying attention. I'll appreciate ya. Now, Starmie. Like, I guess Psychic is probably better, but if able to, I prefer to just use standard Bolt Beam for the sake of these replays, since it's the most consistent thing you can have. But, like, yeah, no, it's not really enough. And that's to show how powerful it is. Look at that. Hyper Beam does like 80-something%. That's just really stupid damage. Really stupid damage. But we're not done yet. Next up, we have Zapdos. And Zapdos' only real hope here is hoping that BAXCALIBUR gets unlucky with paralysis. But that's probably not going to happen. Because as you can see there, Drill Peck isn't even enough to break a sub. So in some ways, BAXCALIBUR is basically as bulky as Rhydon. But Blizzard is a far more dangerous move. Now, like I said, this was when I was realizing, okay, you know what? We actually need to make this an Ubers video. Because this thing is probably just way too good on its own. How good would it actually be in Ubers? Let's look at the other Sword Stance user. Both you have your Sword Stance up. And that Earthquake is not even doing half. While Earthquake most certainly does half the Mew. This is just funny. Like, not even a Mew can stand up to this monster? Are you kidding me? I guess it's also worth noting, I'm just going to give you a spoiler right now. Against Mewtwo, this thing is not going to do the best in a 1v1. But keep in mind that Mewtwo very often gets paralyzed during, like, Mew matches. Or just, I was going to say Mew burst, but I think it's technically a different thing. But let's quickly get on to this. Also, we're going to have not one, but two tier lists to go over. But yeah, against Mewtwo, obviously, this is like the one thing that can easily beat BAXCALIBUR in a 1v1. But Mewtwo very often gets paralyzed. And in some ways, in Ubers, it's even seen as a good thing, because it can help you stall power points when you're going against enemy Mewtwo. But just like how paralyzed Mewtwo is terrified of Snorlax, that is absolutely the same case here with BAXCALIBUR. If I had to bet, I'm going to say that Snorlax still would be the third best Pokemon, but BAXCALIBUR very easily and securely takes the fourth spot. Although they'll be so close it doesn't really matter. But overall, here's the tier list. It has been a long time since I did a tier list where there's quite literally no bad matchups. And Mewtwo doesn't count because it's freaking Gen 1 Mewtwo. Most things are not able to beat that. But like I said, we got one more tier list. And this is the one that Zashri made. Like I said, Generation Jumble, you should definitely join and participate. And what you see on screen is the vast majority of every single Pokemon that's ever been in a season of Generation Jumble. This tier list, if I remember correctly, is from the latest one, where they tried doing a national dex with all of the Pokemon that I've included in the videos. And this is the one that was done on usage rating after the tournament was over. And as you can see here, Hisuian, Zoroark, and Tauros are at the top, but BAXCALIBUR is at the exact same tier with them. Chansey, Snorlax, Starmie, Exeggutor, not even Metagross were able to be as powerful as BAXCALIBUR was. Like, when I say this thing was good, it had a 80% win rate. Honestly, I kind of forgot to look for it, but if you go on the server, so Tina can show you the usage ratings and the win rate, you'll see for yourself. After an entire tournament, BAXCALIBUR had an 80% win rate. When do you ever see that? I just can't believe this thing was so busted, and for a long time, it was kind of overlooked. It's a bit of Jumble history that I won't get into here, but just know that there was a time where, like, there was like a dragon faction that kind of considered BAXCALIBUR to be the weakest out of their choices. And in case you're curious, the other choices were Hisuian Goodra, Cyclizar, and Raging Bull. Well, that's about it for this video. How good do you think BAXCALIBUR is? Do you think it's as good as I'm making it out to be? Or do you think I'm glazing? Let me know in the comments below. But until next time, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.